Viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you are doing well. Today I'm going to take you through a Form 4 topic, and that is a topic of public finance. And this topic is long, and therefore we are going to break it into two parts. So part 1 is what I'm going to deal with now. Okay. Now we start by defining what public finance is. Now public finance refers to all the activities carried out by the government in relation to collecting finances and spending that finance. Okay, which simply means that public finance has two parts. The first part is collecting finance, while the second part is spending that finance. So that is the definition of public finance. Next subtopic is sources of public finance. From where does the government get its money? One source of public finance is fines that are imposed on offenders in courts of law. Secondly, another source of public finance is rent and rates that are charged on the use of government property. For instance, we have social halls, we have county markets, we also have county houses where people pay rent or rates. Then a third source of public finance is license fees. License fees are imposed on people who operate business. Then the fourth source of public finance is interest on loans that are advanced by the government. Okay, interest on loans that are advanced by the government to civil servants. Fifth source of public finance is dividends and profits from government investments. Remember, the government is also in business. Government does business. We have parastatals, we have state corporations, and other kinds of government investments. Yeah. Then number 6, the sixth source of public finance are proceeds from the sale of government property. Sometimes the government sells its property, like old government vehicles are sold off, and the proceeds is part of public finance. Then the seventh source of public finance are taxes. And lastly, we have government borrowing. Now, the last two are the major sources of public finance: taxes and government borrowing. Government borrowing, however, is a source of public finance that the government resorts to if the other sources are not enough to meet the needs at that particular point in time. Therefore, the government resorts to borrowing. Now, we're going to look at government borrowing in details. Yeah. Now, government borrows, and we have the central government borrowing, we have the local government borrowing, we also have state corporations borrowing loans. Now, at any one particular point in time, the government will always have outstanding debt. That outstanding government debt at any particular point in time is referred to as national debt or public debt. Okay? Now, we have two types of borrowing. We have internal borrowing and external borrowing. Now, internal borrowing is whereby the government borrows money from the firms and individuals within the country. And the government can do that how? By selling government securities, e.g. treasury bills and bonds, to the people in the country. However, when the government is borrowing money from within the country, from individuals and firms, it must make sure that it avoids the crowding out effect. It must not borrow too much money such that the private investors are left with little to borrow. Okay, and therefore the government should take care of that, should avoid the crowding out effect, because the government needs money and the private investors need money. Okay. The second source of government, the second type of government borrowing is called external borrowing. Now, external borrowing simply means that the government is borrowing money from outside the country, from other countries or other external financial institutions. Now, with the external borrowing, it's further divided into two. We have bilateral borrowing and multilateral borrowing. Bilateral borrowing is whereby the country borrows from another country. Two countries, one is borrowing from another, like Kenya borrowing from Britain, Kenya borrowing from America, Kenya borrowing from Tanzania, and such like things. Then we have multilateral borrowing. Multilateral borrowing is whereby the government is borrowing from an external financial institution like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank. And the reason why we are calling it multilateral is like it's borrowing from many countries. Why? the money that the country, the government will get from such an institution is money that has been collected from various countries, okay? And therefore we call it multilateral borrowing. Now, when the government is borrowing externally, it must also be keen on the conditions that are set by the external financiers, yeah? Because some of these conditions can actually adversely affect our economy. For instance, if one of the conditions is for the government to retrench civil servants, it means that you're making money, you're getting money, yes, but you're also causing unemployment on the other side, yeah? And unemployment is an indicator of underdevelopment. Then, apart from that, the government should also, which means that the government, before borrowing from external financiers, it should check on the conditions that these external financiers have set up. Now, the next subtopic is classification of national debt. National debt is classified into two. We have reproductive debt as well as deadweight debt. Now, reproductive debt is money borrowed to finance activities that will generate revenue. For instance, if the government borrows money to set up an irrigation scheme, this is a project that will later bring in money that can be used actually to service the borrowed money or to service the loan. Then we have deadweight debt. Now, deadweight debt is money borrowed to finance activities that will not generate any revenue at all. For instance, if the government borrows money to pay civil servants, or the government borrows money to fight an epidemic or a pandemic like the one we have right now, the coronavirus, or the government borrowing money to pay pensions to retirees, that is money that will not generate any revenue at all. And these deadweight debts are actually a burden to the taxpayer, because finally it is the taxpayer who will pay this money that the government is borrowing. Now, the next subtopic is government spending. Now, government spending, as the name suggests, it's the spending of the finances that the government has raised. Now, we have categories of government spending. We have three categories of government spending. We have recurrent expenditure, which is also called consumption expenditure. Now, this is where the government spends money on a regular basis, yeah? Government spending on a regular basis. Like, for instance, government spending money on fueling of government vehicles, government spending money on provision of drugs to public hospitals, government spending money on payment of salaries to civil servants. Then, second category is development expenditure, which is also called the capital expenditure. This is whereby the government is spending money on a specific development project, such as road construction, railway construction, irrigation scheme, constructing an airport, and such like things. Now, after the project has been completed, the expenditure ceases. However, some more money may be used on maintenance, but immediately the project ends, the expenditure ceases. The only thing that will be left will be maintenance every now and then. Third category of government spending is what is referred to as transfer payments. Now, transfer payments refers to government spending money on things that do not directly contribute to the country's national income. Okay? Spending money on things that do not contribute to the country's national income. For instance, spending money to pay bursaries for students. It's money that is spent and it will not contribute anything to national income, because the students themselves are not working, they are not contributing anything, they are basically consumers. Okay? Now, the next subtopic is the principles of public finance. What are the principles of public finance? In other words, before the government spends money, what should it consider? What are the things that it has to look into before it spends any money? One, the expenditure must be sanctioned by Parliament. Parliament must approve the expenditure of such money before that money is spent. Secondly, the money to be spent must provide maximum social benefit. Majority of the citizens of the country must benefit from that expenditure. Let me elaborate a little bit. For instance, there are two roads that are to be constructed, one in area A, another one in area B. Area A has 10,000 people, area B has just 1,000 people. Then if the road is constructed in area A, it will provide maximum social benefit because 10,000 people are going to benefit, while in area B, only 1,000, and therefore, the project that will offer maximum social benefit is the road that is constructed in area A that has more people. Third principle is the government should spend, another consideration that the government should take is economy. The money should be spent in an economic way to avoid waste as much as possible. Fourth principle is proper financial management. Every shilling that the government spends should be accounted for. Okay? It should be accounted for in proper accounting records that will later be audited. And the fifth principle of public finance is flexibility. This money that is spent, it should be flexible enough in case there's an emergency or a disaster. Then that expenditure should be averted to alleviate that disaster. Maybe it's drought, to alleviate the drought by providing food, relief food. And then if there is no such thing, then the money can go back to the initial project that it was meant to. The expenditure should not be, set in stone. It should be flexible, yeah. And that is the end of our part 1 of public finance. There will be a part 2. Thank you very much. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and comment on this YouTube channel. Thank you.